Chapter 4. The SFMC research and rescue vessel Black sat in the bay atop a maintenance bubble. While the shipyard maintenance crew tinkered with engines, checked for cracks in the hull, and tested the avionics and life support systems, S&R Black's engineer, Second Lieutenant Noble, watched a set of holo displays. Talby saw the engineer's fingers dancing before the displays, images and readouts shifting before the man's eyes. Captain Dunn stood a few meters behind him, his eyes buried in his own holo. Talby and Cartwright walked up the steps to the observation deck above S&R Black. While the AIs and shipyard personnel scoured S&R Black for possible problems, Noble monitored their tests and ran additional scans. That was normal before S&R Black left for a mission. Talby held back a grin. He'd been right. They had a mission. Something serious, too. Otherwise, they wouldn't have the attention of everyone in the maintenance crew. When they reached the observation deck, Talby and Cartwright stopped next to Noble's consoles, each man stiffening into attention. "Excuse me, Captain," Talby said. "Lieutenant Talby and Gunny Cartwright reporting." Dunn waved a hand in the air without looking away from his holo. "At ease, and get your asses over here." Talby wasn't sure, but he thought Cartwright's stern countenance had twitched. Talby, on the other hand, was grinning like a child, and he knew it. Captain Dunn didn't stand on ceremony. It was one of the things that probably drove the colonel, a stickler for ceremony and ritual, absolutely insane. But the colonel could afford to demand that. He was in the rear and far away from any danger. Dunn had apparently realized a long time ago that such courtesies and protocols were useful to a point, but eventually turned into its own bureaucracy of sorts. He and Gunny walked past Noble and stood to the left of Dunn. "What's up, sir?" Talby asked. Dunn smiled, froze an image on the holo, and then turned to them. "How'd the training go, Gunny?" Cartwright growled low in his throat. "Not good, sir. Corporal Mira's performance was less than stellar." Dunn blinked and then made eye contact with Talby. "Is she salvageable?" "Isn't everyone, sir?" "James, leave the mother-hen routine at home. Is she worth the effort or not?" He exchanged a glance with Cartwright and then looked back at Dunn. "Yes, Captain, I believe she is." Dunn looked at Cartwright. "Gunny?" "I agree with the lieutenant, sir. Mira has great potential. If she gets past her ego, she might even be able to live up to it." "Ego," Dunn mused. "Please elucidate, Gunny." "Well," Cartwright said, "she hasn't exactly done a good job of integrating with the team, sir. I believe today's training exercise would have gone better for her if the squad trusted her. Or even liked her. She's only been here a few weeks, but she hasn't exactly made it easy." "Ah," Dunn said. He rubbed his chin, the flesh whispering across the rough stubble that had already grown there. "Have either of you spoken with her about this?" "No, sir," Talby said. "I wasn't aware it was a real problem until today." "Good to know. Any other revelations about the exercise? Did you give her the T-87? "Yes, sir. That was," he chuckled, "a bit of a surprise for her." "I'm sure it was." Dunn clucked his tongue. "Okay, we can talk about that later. We'll have plenty of time while we're outbound." A smile appeared on Cartwright's face. Even through his peripheral vision, Talby saw the shark-toothed grin. "Where are we headed, sir?" Dunn turned back to the holo. "Take a look, James. You too, Gunny." Both Talby and Cartwright crowded in to look at the holo. The display glowed with readouts and a map, if you could call it that. Dunn waved a hand at the display, and the dark rectangle filled with stars slowly transforming into bright colors. A legend appeared at the side. The coordinates of the image appeared at the top. Talby blinked at them. That was way the hell out in the Kuiper Belt. Way out there. "This is past Pluto," Talby said. Dunn nodded. "That's who spotted it." "Pardon me, sir," Cartwright said, "but what are we looking at?" "Oh, right." Dunn pointed to the legend. "You see the objects out there, right? The ones the Pluto Observatory has already marked as being ice or rock? What about that little red dot in the corner there?
Red?
Cartwright said and checked the legend.
Metal? This is a huge chunk of ore heading into the system, or something they just recently discovered?
Both, Dunn said. The excitement in his voice made Talby uneasy. Dunn pinched his fingers together and then slowly drew them apart. A rectangle appeared on the screen around the red dot. The display zoomed in. The dot grew until it had a shape. Holy shit, Talby said. That's a ship. Yes, it is. Now, I want you to suspend any disbelief. Allah knows it took me a while to believe it. Talby and Cartwright exchanged a glance but said nothing. Here's where the fun begins. Dunn slid the image aside and brought up a waveform. Listen. He tapped at the play icon. The hollow emitted a series of beeps much like a heart monitor. The sounds increased, decreased, and then drew into a flat whine. The sound repeated every 15 seconds. That's one of ours, Talby said. Military distress, but it doesn't sound right. Modification, sir? Cartwright stood to his full height, his face set in a deep frown.
Not a modification, Lieutenant.
Both Talby and Dunn looked at the gunnery surgeon.
Just old. Very old.
More than 50 years old, in fact, Dunn said. He pointed a finger at the info icon, and the waveform slid to the side, a window of text filling the rest of the display. Talby looked at the first line, and then his brain froze. What he saw didn't make sense. That can't be right, he said in a dead voice.
No, sir, Cartwright said. It can't be.
I told you it was going to be difficult. The Mira, sir? That has to be a mistake. No, James, it's not, Dunn said. She's back, and she's tumbling towards some rather dangerous parts of the belt. One of the AIs suggests Mira could be on a collision course with Pluto or Charon, if, of course, it doesn't get shattered by all the rock and ice out there first.
Does she have power, sir?
Cartwright asked. Good question, Gunny, Dunn said. According to the Pluto observations, Mira's engines appear dead. There aren't any lights on the ship's exterior, so it's impossible to tell what kind of shape she's in. Communications? Talby asked. Unresponsive, Dunn said. She's not acknowledging hails, and apart from the distress beacon, there are no other transmissions. He scrolled through the text and brought up another visual. The pixelated shape they'd seen before returned. This time, however, a red blob of barely discernible fuzz colored one end. But look at this. Talby checked the legend at the bottom. Radiation plume, sir? Perhaps, Dunn said. The AIs have several possible explanations. Reactor leak, radioactive contaminants from a collision with an exo-object, and a host of other bizarre theories. Cartwright grunted.
So much for superior intelligence.
But they're sure it's the Mira, sir? Yes, they are. Dunn collapsed the display and turned. The two men stepped away to give the captain room and put their hands behind their backs. Dunn looked at each of them. SF Gov wants us to retrieve the Mira and bring her back to Trident.
Sir, Cartwright said, we have no proof of survivors or that there's much left of her.
Correct, Gunny. What's your point? Talby asked.
Just thinking, sir, that we should take a full complement of weapons and supplies. We've no idea what we're walking into.
Dunn grinned. You see, Gunny, that's why I keep you around. Cartwright smiled, but only for a second.
My pleasure, sir.
The captain turned his gaze to Talby. James, you know what to do? Aye, sir. Work with Gunny to get the troops ready. Make sure logistics stuffs us to the gills and study like a madman.
Correct,
Dunn said. But there's a catch. What's that, sir? Talby asked. Dunn put his hands on his hips. The colonel has made it very clear that no word of this find or our mission gets out there. As far as logistics knows, we're going on a training mission, and that goes for the team, too. Why all this secrecy, sir? Talby asked. Dunn considered the question for a moment, his eyes focusing on the ship behind them. This is conjecture and not to be repeated ever again. Understood? The two subordinates nodded. Dunn glanced at each man in turn. 70 years ago, the Mira project was the biggest news of the Federation. It was a bright hope that humankind would finally explore the deep depths in person. An entire generation sent nanoprobes to the far reaches, receiving data streams that told us a vast wealth of resources lay beyond Sol, the ones we needed to keep from killing each other. Another generation worked on creating the Mira and the technology necessary for its success. When it launched, all of humankind celebrated. Cartwright nodded, but said nothing. Talby remembered the history hollows of Mira leaving Neptune for the deep Kuiper belt before it engaged its ion thrusters and slowly rocketed away from the solar system. Every day, new hollows of the ship's journey appeared until the crew finally went into stasis for the long journey to Proxima Centauri b. After that, the reports dwindled. The AI didn't have anything to show apart from the grav couches with the crew in suspended animation and the occasional object flying through space. And then it disappeared, Talby said. Right. And once it did, the resource grab only increased in ferocity. There are still entire swaths of humanity that believe Mira will return with the answer to all our questions. Hell, some of them built a religion around it. But if we let the rest of Sol Federation know that it's back, it could possibly usher us into another war. Talby considered that for a moment. Because it's the last gasp of hope we had. The captain said nothing. Fair enough, sir. Gunny and I will say nothing. I'll make sure we encode all the briefing material for our eyes only. I'll create a training mission scenario for the squads to study. Good thinking, Dunn said.
Sir, Gunny said, what if they're all dead? What if she's just a burned-out hulk?
Our orders are to tow her back, regardless. Anything else is the SF Gov's problem.
Aye, sir.
Dunn smiled. Come on, guys, this will be fun. Better than getting shot at, Talby said. That's the spirit. Now get to work. I've already sent block commands to you. They'll authorize you to study the intel we have and any new information we receive from Pluto. It'll take us 10 days to reach Mira. Once we're in the outer belt, we can come clean with the team. Dismissed. Cartwright and Talby saluted their captain, turned on their heels, and headed out of the hangar. Once they reached the precipice, Talby regarded S&R Black. We were bored, Gunny. Guess we're not going to be bored for a while.
Praise Yahweh, Allah, Vishnu, and Christ for that, sir, Cartwright said. Too much leisure time is bad for the soul.
They passed a group of Marines running through the halls, their drill sergeant screaming at them to hurry the fuck up. Cartwright smiled. What are you grinning about, Gunny?
Old days, sir, old days. Doesn't seem like it was that long ago, does it?
Talby couldn't help but chuckle. Gunny Cartwright had fought alongside both he and Captain Dunn on Mars at the Battle of Scaparelli and during the satellite battle. All three of them shared scars from the two incidents. Talby was pretty sure all three of them shared nightmares from them as well. No, Gunny, it doesn't seem like yesterday to me. Seems like 1,000 years ago. The grin faded. Cartwright's lips slowly melted back into an expressionless line.
Aye, sir, I guess it does.
For a moment, they walked in silence, the hum of the grav plates their sole companion. SFMC Trident Station at Neptune shipyards wasn't the most populated base in Sol space, but it was the largest. It had room for the entire Marine Corps should it be necessary, but it always felt empty, soulless. New Paris Island on Mars was still home to the SFMC. You couldn't throw a pebble without hitting someone at that base. The mess hall was so loud you could barely hear yourself think. But here at Trident, you were lucky if two companies ate together in the vast expanse of the common areas.
Sir?
Cartwright asked. Yes, Gunny?
How do you want to handle the troops?
Like mushrooms, Talby said. In the dark and full of shit.
Aye, sir. Was hoping you'd say that.
Chapter 5. 2 days. He had 2 goddamn days to prep a ship that hadn't seen real action in over 4 months. 4 months of sitting in dry dock without serious maintenance. He was ready to kill logistics for what they'd done to his baby. Bad enough they hadn't allowed him to run his own diagnostics and maintenance routines, but then they'd fucked up everything he had so carefully put together on the ship. Upgraded his AI and reset his protocol instructions, all because some asshole at a desk decided modernity beat out tried and tested methodologies? Fucking bullshit. Noble growled at the hollow. Gunny and Talby were gone, leaving him alone. The captain had already told him they were heading to the Kuiper Belt, but not why. And when were they heading there? In 2 days. 2 days! The words continued rattling around his skull. It was a mantra, something for him to focus his anger on. That mantra would also keep him from pulling a vibroblade and shivving the asshole running the hangar. He glared at the display after he saw the onboard computer CPUs were near 70% of available utilization. What have you morons done now? Noble was about to call down to the naval engineers to ask them just what the fuck they thought they were doing when he noticed a connection had been made to the hangar AI. Fortunas, he said to the holo display.
Yes, Lieutenant?
A male falsetto said through the holo console speakers. What the hell are you doing to my ship? The voice was silent for a moment.
Attempting to undo part of what they did.
He raised an eyebrow. And how are you going to do that exactly? When the AI spoke again, the voice contained the barest hint of smugness.
I am merging the updated blocks with backups from your stash. I will then run stress tests to ensure there are no incompatibilities. If there are, may I alert you to them so you can help advise me?
The tide of rage that had threatened to spill over subsided. Who gave you permission to do that?
Captain Dunn, of course.
He blinked at the holo. When did he tell you to do that?
About the time you started cursing about monkeys with code blocks.
The AI said matter-of-factly. Noble couldn't help but grin. He wanted to look over his shoulder at Dunn, but he didn't dare interrupt the captain while he was mission planning, which brought up another question. Why the hell was he out here in the hangar when he'd have privacy in his office? I'll have to thank him for that, and thank you, Portunas.
My pleasure,
the AI said.
Sometimes human beings have bad ideas that sound like good ones.
It said.
And sometimes AIs have good ideas that sound like bad ones.
Whose idea was it to completely fuck up my ship?
The Colonel's,
Portunas said.
Although in his defense, the order for new blocks was made higher up the chain of command. I'm afraid I can't reveal more than that.
Funny, even AIs had to cover their asses. Understood, and thank you again.
I have reserved enough computing power to focus specifically on preparing Black for your mission, Lieutenant. I will be monitoring every facet of her for as long as I can, but once you leave Neptune space, I won't be able to assist.
I know, Noble said, and that sucks.
Black will be able to help you,
it said.
Although it's inferior to me, the last upgrades did increase the system's overall intelligence.
Noble shook his head. He tried to respond to the statement, but could only laugh instead. Portunas, he said as soon as he stopped, you are one of a kind. The AI paused for a moment before speaking.
I'm sorry. Did I say something amusing and not realize it?
Forget it, Noble managed to say without breaking into another gale of laughter. Did they give Black some new datasets to mull over?
You'll have to ask Black about that. Once you've finished your stat checks against what the monkeys with code blocks have done, you should have a chat with Black. You might be impressed. I'm not, but you might be.
Noble rolled his eyes. Portunas was the most sarcastic AI he'd ever come across, but that didn't mean it was an exception. When he had significant downtime, as he'd had lately, he spent time on the holo boards with other engineers, comparing notes about new Starship technology, as well as engaging with the rumor mill and the developmental AIs. The overall state of the tech was moving in a different direction from quantum computing. The next hurdle was one humanity had attempted before but failed to bring to fruition. wet-wired AIs. Creating them meant actually building a facsimile of a human brain. There had been successes hundreds of years ago, but the technology was abandoned after experiencing significant issues with tissue decay. While the AIs lived only a short time, they demonstrated superior analytical skills. AI rights groups finally managed to scuttle the research altogether using a combination of religious arguments and human rights protests. But the tech was back with a vengeance. 4 new companies were working as fast as they could to bring about a new generation. Rumor held that the next great starship sent into deep space, should that ever happen, would use wet-wired AIs. Noble didn't have any opinion on the subject, but the forums buzzed with pro and counter arguments to artificial life servitude. Noble didn't give a shit, so long as the AIs didn't go crazy and decide to play God with their human charges. Somehow, Noble said as he quickly scanned another diagnostic, I doubt you'll ever be impressed with another AI. Fortunus was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice dripped with remorse.
My apologies, Lieutenant Noble. I didn't mean to sound arrogant. I was simply stating the obvious.
Obviously, Noble said dryly.
Black has 1/30th of my computing power and a personality profile that is much older. She is adequate for your missions, for helping you maintain the ship as well as Lieutenant Oakes in piloting her. But surely you realize the difference in complexity between one of the 3 sentient AIs on this station and the barely sentient personality of a craft such as yours.
Fortunus took the space of a breath before resuming.
That is simple arithmetic, sir.
Noble smiled at the screen. He knew Fortunus was monitoring his heart rate, studying every expression of his face, the way his eyes moved, everything to determine whether or not he was about to lie. I understand, Fortunus. Your logic is as impeccable as always. He tapped a hollow icon, and the display changed to a series of views of the engine bay. Several jumpsuit-wearing shipyard nerds knelt at open panels, their instruments connecting to different ship components. However, if you did not intend to sound arrogant, I suggest you analyze some hollows and listen to the speech patterns. The falsetto buzzed.
I will take that advice, Lieutenant.
Good. He stepped back from the image, his eyes quickly flicking from one view to the other. What are those squiddies doing?
I told them to run manual panel checks and not trust Black. Until I finish my diagnostic runs on her sensors and the merged code, I don't want to run the risk of her getting an incorrect report.
Well, he said, what is my job again?
Sir?
Fortunus said. It thought for a moment.
I believe your job is to study Kuiper belt stresses with me and to advise on anomalies I find in the ship's systems.
Noble held up a finger. Right. Now, let's talk about Kuiper.